Hi, this is Little Dwarf and I present to you the last, at least for the time being, episode of the series covering secrets, Easter eggs and easily overlooked hidden details in my favorite game of all time, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. If you didn't see the previous episodes, you'll find links to them in the description. There is also additional information there, as well as other links and materials to provide broader context about my findings. This episode will cover the Chinatown hub, as well as all of the maps of the endgame missions, such as the Society of Leopold's monastery or Griffith Park. When you first talk to Ming Zhao and ask her about the missing Nosferatu Barabus, she offers some explanation.
So, the great Nosferatu have lost an agent, have they? It was not by my hand, if that's what they think.
After that, one of your character responses is, "If the glove fits." This is a reference to the trial of O.J. Simpson, an American football star and actor accused of murder in a highly publicized trial. His defender, Johnnie Cochran, defended him with a famous, borderline mimetic phrase, "If the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit," after presenting that Simpson apparently had trouble putting on a glove found on the crime scene.
Gloves didn't fit. Remember these words. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
This seems to imply that if you choose this dialogue option, your player character doesn't really believe Ming Zhao, since if in the real-life example the saying was, "If the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit," stating "if the glove fits" would imply guilt. The next stop is the White Cloud, a shop belonging to the sinister Mr. Ox. Now, Mr. Ox is probably one of the most mysterious characters in Bloodlines. At first, if you check him with the Auspex discipline, Mr. Ox just seems an incredibly creepy mortal. Sure, he likes talking about strange things, such as eye gouging and stuff, but everybody has to have a hobby, right?
There is something in this store for everybody. How rude of me not to introduce myself. You may call me Mr. Ox. This is my shop. Do you find it interesting? There are no two like it on the road to hell.
But then if you try to attack him, he disappears in a blinding flash. And to make matters worse, the Malkavian protagonist, whose insight provides him with unique information about the character backgrounds and intentions, is unsettled by Mr. Ox. So who is he? Well, my first guess would be a mage. Mages in the world of darkness are theoretically mortals, and yet they command powers that many of the supernatural creatures would find unthinkable. Seeing how he is obsessed with death, the macabre and the gruesome, he might be of the Euthanatoi tradition, a subset of mages frequently dealing with those subjects and drawing their power from death in particular. The second and more wild possibility is that he is somehow a personification of the Chinese guardian of the underworld, Nyoto, whose very name translates to Oxhead. Note that besides his obsession with death, Mr. Ox in-game literally tells you about his shop that
This is my shop. Do you find it interesting? There are no two like it on the road to hell.
And also notes, laughing ominously, that
Everyone gets what they deserve.
who would stand on the road to hell and give people what they deserve if not the guardian of the gateway to the underworld? Next small detail is this herbal tea in Tseng's shop with an interesting name. Apparently it's called tea, which seems to be a reference to, well, just look at its logo and I think you'll get it. Now that I think about it, Bloodlines seems to be really keen on sneaking jokes, profanity or both, in the form of small, almost unnoticeable textures on inconsequential objects. Not that I'm complaining, it has been fun looking for those. In the similar vein, there are those shampoo bottles in the Lotus parlor. Two of those were found already earlier, but there's one new one that seems to be unique to this location in particular. The next two references / Easter eggs can be found in the Fu Syndicate. Actually, now that I read it out loud, it seems to me that its very name might be a joke in itself, since you could very well read it as Fu Syndicate. First, the Van Helsing experiment, testing the kindred resistance to crosses, is an obvious reference to the character of Professor Van Helsing from Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Sometimes myths are constructed around legitimate observations. Let us find out if there's any truth in those suspicion. Initiate Van Helsing experiment. Van Helsing hypothesis tests false. Well, when God fails, put your faith in the gun.
Second, the team of mercenaries sent to dispatch you is called the Belmont team. This in turn is a reference to the Castlevania series of games, where the Belmonts are a family of vampire slayers. One of them, in the form of the player character, faces Count Dracula himself. Barabus, the Nosferatu found in the Fu Syndicate, has some binary code on his shirt, which is really fitting with him being a tech expert. However, I was really disappointed that it isn't, at least if I was doing the conversion correctly, any kind of actual encoded word or something. To my knowledge, it's just numbers. Before leaving Chinatown, I felt compelled to remind you that there's a ton of Chinese writing in this location. Sadly, I myself can't read Chinese, and in fact I'm so ignorant that it could probably very well be Japanese and I wouldn't even know the difference. But I'm talking about it since if my gaming experience has taught me anything, is that whenever there's a language that most of the game's audience is probably not going to be familiar with, the developers often get, well, creative with it. So I totally wouldn't be surprised if there's something hilarious in there, either intended or just coincidental, due to a mistranslation. So if any of you know Chinese, maybe take a look when you next play Bloodlines. There's a chance you'll find something amusing. If you do, please let me know. The next stop is the Giovanni Mansion. There isn't much to show here, but in one of the bathrooms you can find those two girls in curious positions. If I were to guess, I'd say they were probably supposed to be snorting cocaine or something. You can't really interact with them, but I still find it interesting, since it's the only such case in the game. This next thing isn't really a secret, because it's in plain sight, but it's so out of the way from your main objective that you might have not noticed. I actually didn't on my first playthrough. In the Society of Leopold's monastery, there's this big boulder on the hill, and you can destroy its support to make it tumble down. There isn't much use for it. You could crush some enemies, I guess, but the setup would probably take more work than it's worth. I still find it a curious remnant of the broader range of environmental possibilities that Bloodlines was maybe once supposed to offer. Inside the monastery itself, there also isn't much to show, apart from this ammo box. If you look at it closely, it says everyone will die on them. Isn't that an optimistic message? Next, there's the werewolf. Now, most of you are probably familiar with the way to kill it, but what you might not know are the implications of that. As you can see, the werewolf's dead body stays, well, werewolfy. So does the other body of the werewolf that Nine stakes out, by the way, which is actually a pretty big clue. You see, in the world of darkness, shapeshifter creatures usually revert to their natural birth form upon death, so in case of most werewolves, either a normal human or a normal wolf. It's part of their masquerade protection system, in a way. But there's one breed of werewolves that is actually born in what you see here, the monstrous warform known as the Crinus, and thus stays in it even after death. That's the Metis, a shunned, ostracized breed, born out of the forbidden love between two werewolves. And it totally makes sense for this one to be a Metis too. Since they are disliked, they would have been given the most thankless, dangerous jobs, such as patrolling the outer rims of their territory, or checking out a dangerous area that's, I don't know, currently on fire or something. Now, let's hop into Caine's taxicab. Caine's taxicab would make a fine name for a movie, by the way, or maybe a band, but that's besides the point. This sequence has always fascinated me, and I was eager to explore it further. Then, you need to type in dialogue_force_end, which will, as you could probably guess, end the dialogue and let you explore the area. As you can see, it's really interesting because it's not the cars that move, but the road itself in fact, which rolls on and on as a sort of treadmill. What's even more interesting is that some of the cars seem to have collision models, so you can even jump onto some of them. It's weird because you wouldn't ever be able to do that or see that if you didn't use cheats in the first place. The rear view mirror in the cab isn't actually a mirror at all. In fact, it's a monitor which transmits the image of Caine's face. As you can see, you can even interact with it as you would with any other monitors in the game, and the same TV interaction icon shows up. The last thing, and perhaps most interesting to me personally, is Caine's taxi license. It's really blurry, but it seems obvious to me that it isn't his photo there, which is kind of pointless and weird. Weirder still, it seems somewhat familiar to me, but I can't pinpoint the source. It does look suspiciously like Henry Townsend, the protagonist of Silent Hill 4, though. If you know where it comes from, or do you have any suggestions at the very least, let me know in the comments. Now, I can't really read the surname on the license because it's too blurry, but the name itself is interesting enough, Michael. Now, both in the World of Darkness lore and in the real-world theology, Archangel Michael is the leader of the heavenly host, the one that, on behest of God, defeated Lucifer in his rebellion. And in the World of Darkness, he is also the one that metes out God's punishment, so it isn't out of the question that he would be the one to punish Caine after he killed Abel. And I just find it kind of hilarious that there's a possibility that Caine used the name of the one who punished him as his cover identity. Next, on the last audition of the Depth of Night, the local conspiracy nut, Gomez, pretty much uncovers all of the game's plot.
Next caller.
Yeah, this is it. This time I've stumbled across something that's bigger than anything you could possibly imagine. A threat to the entire human race's existence.
Ah, Gomez. You know, it's been a bad night when I've been looking forward to your call.
Yeah, nothing could prepare the world for this. This is the biggest story in the history of humanity ever. Ever, Deb. How I found this out I can't say, but I'm risking my life to tell the world this. Are you prepared for this?
Sure.
People of Los Angeles, vampires walk among us.
Ugh, not vampires again.
Hear me out, Deb. Vampires are among us and have been since the dawn of time. In Los Angeles, well, there's more vampires per person here than anywhere else in the world. People are killed by vampires all the time, but their secret vampire society covers it up. Who blew up that warehouse in Santa Monica? Vampires. What happened to the crew of the Elizabeth Dane? Vampires. Want to know what happened to that sarcophagus that disappeared? Vampires took it. The Prince of Vampires, to be more specific. He wants to use it against a league of other vampires that have been trying to get a foothold in our city. And get this, there could be an even older vampire in the sarcophagus. An ancient super vampire.
Right, vampires. They're everywhere. You can't throw a rock in the city without hitting a vampire.
It's the truth, Deb. The undead are all around us. We need to rise up and destroy our evil vampire overlords before it's too late.
You heard him, folks. Gather up your crosses, garlic, and neck braces. Oh, brother. Well, Deb's not undead, but the sun will be up soon and she's dead tired. She's going home to get some hard-earned R&R. But don't worry, she'll be back same time, same station tomorrow night. Until then, fans, don't let the vampires bite.
It's a giant masquerade breach, of course, and I don't suspect Gomez's lifespan will be too long after that. But what's interesting is Deb's reaction to it. She's a little alarmed, which, coupled with her reaction to Andre earlier, and her mocking people for referencing vampires, seems to suggest that she herself may be a vampire, or maybe a ghoul, keeping tabs on mortals and protecting the masquerade. Once again, I feel obligated to remind you that the whole radio show in-game is pretty hilarious and well worth a listen in its entirety. If you want, there's a link in the description for that. The next interesting thing can be heard when talking to Mercurio for the last time. If you ask him about people, he will tell you that Troika Games, the developers of this very game, are working on something that could endanger the masquerade. It's a little sad to hear it nowadays, when they are not around anymore. Still, it's a cool Easter egg.
RPG house, not in LA. It's in Irvine, a little south. Tim Caine, Leonard Boyarsky, and Jason Anderson are the major players. Working on a secret project. I don't know much about it. Camarillas can certainly know too much.
Now, on to the last couple of things I have to show you, contained, suitably enough, in the epilogues. First, the Camarilla ending where you side with Strauss is a pretty direct visual reference to the end of the movie Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, where the ancient artifact is stored and hidden away in a huge warehouse in an unassuming box. Finally, thanks to the efforts of the user Xylonbane on the Planet Vampire forums, I obtained a version of the outro map that lets you wander around outside of the cutscene and take a closer look at some things. Now that I mention Xylonbane, he actually conducted a very interesting investigation trying to figure out where Jack and Messerach are hanging out in real-life location terms relative to Los Angeles City. Take a look at the link in the description to learn more. Now, there isn't much to see here, just Caine's cab and what's presumably Jack's car. You can also see some visual effects on Caine, possibly signifying him using a vampiric discipline. But what's interesting is that you might take a closer look at Messerach, the ancient Assyrian king, and you can see that apparently Jack has made the efforts to give him pants, jeans to be exact. I just find it hilarious, not only because of the mismatched styles of giving an ancient mummy modern clothing, but simply due to the effort on Jack's part. And that's it, I guess. Thank you all for watching and for the warm reception of this series overall. I received a lot of kind words and comments, and I'm immensely grateful for that. Bloodlines is my favorite game of all time, and I was happy to share my love of it with you all. There will be one episode more, a compilation of all of the unique NPC reactions to the Nosferatu protagonist that I made as a byproduct while producing this series, but it isn't exactly hidden and probably won't contain any commentary because I don't think it needs it. What other kind of content would you like to see? Anything else about Bloodlines you're interested in? Maybe some other game you'd like me to take a closer look at. There are few I am as knowledgeable about as with Bloodlines, but they do exist, so it might just happen I know something about a game you like and could show you something fun. Give me your suggestions in the comments below. Here in the end, allow me to shill my own channel for a second. I mostly do Let's Plays, which I understand are inherently less interesting than such a series as this one, but still. If you enjoyed my inquisitiveness in exploring Bloodlines, you might actually enjoy some of them. I try to explore everything, talk to everyone, and really immerse myself deep into the story and the world of the games I play, often extensively commenting on my thoughts and feelings regarding the story and the characters as I play. Of particular note to the fans of Bloodlines might be this 100% in-character playthrough I'm doing right now. It's intended as a full roleplay, so I only speak voicing my character's thoughts and words, and I don't refer at all to the outside world, trying to immerse myself completely in portraying my character's journey. There's a link in the description if you want to take a look. I also made an essay about humor in Portal 2 and my problems with it, and I'd like to make more essays in the future if time allows. There's a link to that in the description as well. In the end, I'd also like to thank my glorious liege lord and best friend Kviles for encouragement and early beta testing when making those videos, as well as the YouTuber SheSays, who partially served as an inspiration. He makes those kinds of videos for all types of games. Feel free to check his channel, the link is in the description. And for now, well, that's all for this one, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!